away from the stories ran from, well, I think she had some kind of minor surgery, all the way up to, well, you know, Michelle, she doesn't listen. It's good to see you again, Mark.
My goodness, you're all here.
And you are also, which is great.
So we're going to take just a couple seconds to make sure that the stream is running fine, and then we'll get started in here. So talk amongst yourselves. Give us 2 minutes. Actually, I do have a request from the live stream. Julie Enerson in the live stream asks if the folks here can wave to the folks on the live stream to say hi. Okay. Welcome to this new thing. Welcome to the Unitarian Church of Lincoln. We are gathered together this morning in a small group here and in a larger group live streaming on YouTube for worship for the first time since March of 2020, 419 days. A couple reminders. This is particular for those in the room with us. We are still in the midst of a global pandemic. So my first ask is to please keep your masks on while you're in this building. There's one exception to that, and that's those of us speaking behind this glass on the live stream and on the mic will not wear masks while we're here. But the other part of that ask is that in order to maintain 6 feet and not accidentally breathe on you, if you are in the building, if you can stay on the tiled part of the floor and not come onto the carpet in the sanctuary. That's about 7 feet from where I am. The other strange part of this service is that we won't be singing this morning. I know it is strange to be in this room and not sing together, but that is part of the pandemic that we're in the midst of. We're live streaming this service, so if you don't want to be in any camera shots by accident, the camera line ends right about that aisle over there. So if you're on that side, you're out of the camera shot. If you're over here, you're in the camera shot for the gathered congregation. The biggest time where you'll be on camera is during joys and sorrows after the sermon. Last, as we begin, we are trying a lot of new things all at once this morning. And the thing that makes me hopeful this morning and that has made me hopeful this week, even in the midst of my anxiety, is that we've actually done this before. 3 months before the pandemic. In a moment, I'll tell you why there's a cell phone on the pulpit. 3 months before the pandemic, on January 12th of 2020, if you can remember back that far to that antediluvian time, we totally redid how we were worshiping in this space, right? We added a second service. We stopped using printed orders of service. We introduced new pieces of liturgy, new ways of doing religious education, and we did it all on January 12th of 2020. And I remember saying in the months leading up to January 12th that the same thing that I tell every couple getting married, on the big day, something is going to go dramatically wrong. Any system with this many moving pieces, launched for the first time, with this many people involved, is going to have something happen that in the moment feels like a catastrophe. And when, not if that happens, I tell couples, you will be fine. At the end of the day, you will have still done the thing. You will still be married. And for churches launching new programs, not couples about to get married, I would say we will learn from each mistake and do better next time. So last time, the thing that went dramatically wrong is 36 hours before January 12th, I got as sick as I have been in years and had to call a worship associate at the last possible minute to say, can you cover for me on this launch day that we've been working towards for a year? You know what? It went great. It was beautiful. It was wonderful. We learned a lot. We did it again on January 19th, this time with me preaching. So I don't know what's going to go wrong in the next hour. I've got about 4 different jobs this morning that I'm trying to do simultaneously. So whatever goes wrong, it will likely be my fault. But when that happens, I want all of us, this is as much a reminder to myself as anyone else, to take a deep breath and to remember that we will be fine. At the end of the day, we will have done this thing. We'll learn from our mistakes as they happen. So on to worship. And we'll begin with music. Our chalice lighting words this morning are by the poet John O'Donohue, who writes in Matins, "Somewhere out at the edges, the night is turning, and the waves of darkness begin to brighten the shores of dawn. The heavy dark falls back to earth, and the freed air goes wild with light. The heart fills with fresh, bright color, and thoughts stir to give birth to breath. I arise today, in the name of silence, womb of the word, in the name of stillness, home of belonging, in the name of solitude, of the soul and of the earth. I arise today, blessed of all things, by all things, wings of breath, delight of eyes, wonder of whisper, intimacy of touch, eternity of soul, urgency of thought, miracle of health, embrace of God. May I live this day, compassionate of heart, clear in word, gracious in awareness, generous in love." Welcome to the Unitarian Church of Lincoln on this Sunday morning. My name is the Reverend Oscar Sinclair. We have about 37 people gathered here and another 60 or so live right now on the live stream. I said I would tell you what this is. This is actually the live stream chat running as live as it can be. The Unitarian Church of Lincoln, we say every Sunday, aspires to be a loving community, uniting reason with spiritual exploration to transform ourselves and the world. That is a big vision. We know that creating a loving community begins with welcome. So whether this is your first time with us or your 500th, if you came here hopeful or heartbroken, if you are here in our sanctuary, or if you are here in our live stream, or if you are watching this 3 years from now to see what we did wrong that first time we live streamed, whatever your age, gender, skin color, whomever you love, you are welcome here. We are about the work of transformation in this place. That feels very real today. But it is hard to transform the world without the world knowing what we're about. So when you go forth from this place, if this has been a place of transformation from you, for you, don't keep it a secret. Tell people. Say it was this community. Being involved in this community kept me going through a global pandemic. You realize that that's a thing that you get to say like once in your life, right? So say it. If it's true, go say it once we get done. As we enter into worship, take a moment to center yourself in whatever place you find yourself, in whatever time you find yourself. Find a comfortable place in your body and let your soul settle down. Take a few deep breaths and let us begin.
Our story today is called The Invisible Web, and it is different than the story called The Invisible String, which was the story that I read to our children the first week that we were online. And I also read it again for service a couple weeks ago. The story is by the same author. The very best news ever has begun to spread all over the world, one heart at a time. Shout it from the mountaintops Every single one of us is connected to those we love by invisible strings. That means Giovanna and her daddy are always together, even though he moved to a new house. Omar can feel the tugs of love from his parents, even though he is living far away at school. And Mr. Chang still feels Mrs. Chang close by, even though she died such a very long time ago. And you, at this very moment, may feel the string of someone close to you, even though they aren't there, or if they're 6 feet away. You can't see it, but it's real. Our strings reach to everyone we know. They travel far and wide to family and friends, classmates and coaches, to bus drivers and babysitters, neighbors and pets, to aunts and uncles and grandparents and grandchildren and countless other people. And all of those people have hundreds of strings. Soaring high over rocky peaks and across the 7 seas, deep into jungles and valleys, and winding through the busiest of cities, all these strings crisscross one another. Oh, I suddenly got emotional. And create a nest that covers the planet, interlacing us together, cradling us forever. The invisible web. A lot of emotions today, huh? And it's Mother's Day. The web has no borders and wraps every continent. Within it live butterflies and flowers, starfish and seahorses, lions and ants, rivers and snowstorms, and all human beings. Giovanna, Omar, Mr. Chang, and of course, you and me too. Some say it even reaches to our ancestors and those we cherish in the beyond. One tug on a string sends love to every one of us woven together in this divine tapestry. And that means just one good deed travels across the entire web. Everything is linked. But sometimes, folks, when they can't feel their strings, they forget about our invisible web, and that's when strings get tangled up. Like when lonely Louisa isn't invited to sit with anyone at her school at lunchtime. Or when sad Stefano wishes his friend Marcos wasn't so bossy when they played. Or when Mrs. Patel struggles at work without help and she just wants to quit. Even violence and war can erupt when too many of us forget the web. When strings are ignored, they become weak and begin to unravel. But the more that people who care for the web, the stronger that it remains. The web feels like every parent since the beginning of time, holding and protecting each one of us in millions of gentle arms. What could be stronger than all those hands holding us close? So many supportive fingers can always find a way to untangle strings so that love can flow again. But it's up to every one of us to spread the word. Our time is right now. As we tell our family and friends, sisters will remind brothers, who will write to cousins, who will call their great-grandparents, who will just nod and smile as if they've always known. If we remember the web and tug at it often, nobody will ever be left out. We will see others more clearly. The people of the world will look into each other's eyes, they will smile at one another, and when one of them cries, they will all want to help. And they do. Marcos apologizes to Stefano, who forgives his friend, and they have even more fun playing. Someone helps Mrs. Patel at work and tells her what a great job she's doing, and she remembers that she's important and feels happy. And Louisa feels warm and bubbly inside when a few of the kids in class ask her to join them under the banyan tree for lunch. She knows right then that the invisible web is real. After school, Louisa cries with joy as she strokes her cat, who purrs the news to the stars, and the stars whisper the secret to the clouds, who share it with the songbirds, who serenade the world with this exquisite melody of love at the start of each morning and all during the day, until, as the invisible web glitters in the magic of twilight, The owls take over and hoot the news throughout the night. The invisible web is alive. Its time is right now. It is breathless as we breathe, pulsating all over our earth, the single heartbeat of life and love. And do you know what that makes us all? One very big family. And that is the end of our story today.
We would be one as now we join in singing our hymn of love to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other to show to all a new community. We would be one in building for tomorrow a nobler world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for that meaning which binds our hearts and points us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service, with love and justice strive to make us free.
So as a reminder, I know this is really hard, but we can't actually sing as a congregation right now. That is one of the most dangerous things that we can do in the midst of the pandemic, is sing as a group. So I don't know who's singing because you're all wearing masks. But just as a reminder, I know that's really hard. I know that's really hard, and we will get there, but we're not quite there yet. Our reading this morning is from the Polish poet Wisława Szymborska, who writes a contribution to statistics. Out of 100 people, those who always know better, 52. Doubting every step, nearly all the rest. Glad to lend a hand if it doesn't take too long, as high as 49. Always good because they can't be otherwise. 4. Maybe 5. Able to admire without envy, 18. Suffering illusions induced by fleeting youth, 60, give or take a few. Not to be taken lightly, 40 and 4. Living in constant fear of someone or something, 77. Capable of happiness, 20-something, tops. Harmlessly harmless singly, savage in crowds, half at least. Cruel when forced by circumstances. Better not to know. Not even ballpark figures. Wise after the fact, just a couple more than wise before it. Taking only things from life. 30, I wish I were wrong. Hunched in pain, no flashlight in the dark. 83, sooner or later. Righteous. 35, which is a lot. Righteous and understanding. 3. Worthy of compassion. 99. Mortal. 100 out of 100. Thus far, this figure remains unchanged. Are you going to be okay? Big changes often start with little questions. And that was certainly the case for Stacy and I last July. We were at the end of a visit from my parents in the midst of that summer lull in the pandemic, and my folks had quarantined for 2 weeks in upstate New York, and then driven out to Nebraska, stopping I think once in Illinois for gas, to see their granddaughter and probably to check in on their son and daughter-in-law. And towards the end of their visit in July, 2 things were crystal clear. Their visit had been wonderful, and nobody was ready for them to leave. Are you going to be okay? Honestly, we're struggling, we said. Big changes start with small questions and honest answers sometimes. Now, Stacy and I objectively had then and have had since a relatively easy path through the last year. Stacy has worked from home full-time since 2017. And while I have some complicated health conditions, my job went fully remote as soon as the scope of the pandemic became clear. We have a backyard and the means to self-isolate in relative comfort. But when my parents asked last July, we were struggling. We have a 3-year-old. Our toddler is wonderful. And 3 months into the pandemic, we had not had half an hour to ourselves in months. Our dog is a 4-legged ball of fur, love, and raw enthusiasm, and we were having a hard time keeping up. And while Stacy and I, in so many things and in so many ways, are absolutely partners, it does turn out that 2 people without adult social outlets can run out of things to talk about. Between the child, the dog, and the real isolation, we were struggling. If you've been following the last few months of daily updates, you actually know how this story goes. Or if you've just been watching the background behind my pre-recorded sermons, you can probably put it together. My parents moved from New York to Nebraska last fall. And when they had to return to Dryden over the winter, Stacy and I went with them. And then the whole crew returned back to Lincoln. In the end, we spent 6 months of the last year living as a family of 5. 4 adults, 1 3-year-old, and a 4-legged bundle of fur and enthusiasm. This was more than a visit. It was a chance to rethink the rather arbitrary distinction between nuclear and extended family, and rethink what it means to ask for and get support from one another. Now, today is Mother's Day. Admittedly, a strange holiday. In 1870, what evolved 40 years later into the American holiday of Mother's Day with President Wilson's proclamation in 1912, began with a proclamation on the second Sunday of June, written by the Unitarian Julia Ward Howe. It sounds a little different than the Hallmark cards we associate with the holiday today. Writing in the aftermath of the Franco-Prussian War, Howe proclaimed, "Arise, all women who have hearts, whether your baptism be that of water or of tears. Say firmly, we will not have great questions decided by irrelevant agencies. Our husbands shall not come to us reeking with carnage for caresses and applause. Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all we have been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and patience. We, women of one country, will be too tender to those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injure theirs." From the sword of murder is not the balance of justice. Blood does not wipe out dishonor, nor violence vindicate possession, as men have often forsaken the plow and the anvil at the summons of war. Let women now leave, that all may leave home for a great and earnest day of council. Doesn't fit on a Hallmark card. One of Julia Ward Howe's collaborators on that proclamation in 1870 was Anna Jarvis, who later advocated for Mother's Day to be celebrated as a holiday, not just as a pacifist memorial, but a day of thanks for, in her words, the person who has done more for you than anyone in the world. And in the time I've been in ministry in Unitarian Universalism, the Mother's Day sermon is one of those Sundays on the calendar, like the Sunday after Christmas or the Sunday before General Assembly, that few preachers actively look forward to. And part of it is the hallmark nature of the holiday. It makes it really hard to come up with anything original to say. But in her lifetime, actually, even Anna Jarvis led protests and boycotts of florists and confectioners to protest Mother's Day specials there. But just as complicated as the commercialization of the holiday is this, we know that there are many ways to nurture and be nurtured. And we know in Unitarian Universalist churches in 2021 that there are many complicated relationships with families of our birth. And the proclamation a century ago that Mother's Day recognizes the person who has done more for you than any in the world feels at best incomplete. We hold a multitude of stories in this place. For some of us, our mothers are the person who has done more for us than any other. My mother and father just radically transformed their lives for half a year to help their son and daughter-in-law manage in the midst of a pandemic. But that's not the only story. Others among us might have difficult relationships with mother figures in our lives, or others among us might not relate to the interpersonal aspects of Mother's Day, but might hear an echo in our soul at Julia Ward Howe's proclamation. In this last part too, I am included because I learned both my radicalism and my pacifism from Julie Powell. And there are certainly some of us who join Ann Jarvis perhaps in rolling your eyes at the commercialization of a federal holiday recognizing a single family relationship through the sending of pre-written cards, flowers, and chocolate. It is hard to condense down complex and loving relationships into a day of appreciation. As a social media post about Teacher Appreciation Week this month put it, if your profession needs an appreciation week, you probably aren't being paid enough. But the point here is that we contain multitudes. There are as many ways of honoring the people who loved us into being as there are people participating in this worship service this morning. And each family, of birth or of choice, has a unique story of love and care. And this part we're really good at, right? Because this is Unitarian Universalism. I don't know that there is a more succinct summary of both our theology and our commitments to justice than the chants of "love is love" from the marriage equality fight a couple years ago. Chants that eventually became "love wins," which is an expression of our eschatology, even if we don't usually think of it that way. The 3 words, love is love. Julia Ward Howe and Anna Jarvis lived in the past. It's a different country there. If they were alive now, I have to imagine that they would come up with something a little less heteronormative than what they wrote 4 and 5 generations ago. But what they were getting at was not biology, but it was care. The person who has done the most for you, the parent who refuses to countenance their child being taught to kill. There are many, many ways to care. Family makeup, it's increasingly clear to me from lived experience, has little to do with either biology or the norm of a single nuclear family. Love is love, after all, and just as there are many, many ways of celebrating mother figures, as there are people participating in this service, there are as many ways to exist as a family. This has been real for my family in the last year, because Stacey and I are in some ways as traditional as it comes. We were a young family, married in Nebraska, with a child, a picket fence, and a Labrador, which is truly the suburban minivan of dogs. And for 6 months of the last year, we lived not as a normative suburban family unit, but as a multi-generational household, sharing everything from childcare to brunch. And we would not have done this. We could not have done this were it not for the pandemic. And yet, it was beautiful to watch Ailish and my mother interact for 6 months, to get to know each other. To have 4 adults be able to split everything that goes into a household. To have Ailish have that experience of being at the center of that much love. The lived experience helped me understand in ways hearing or reading simply cannot. The lived benefits of other ways of being family. And it was a reminder that for much of our history, and in most places, multi-generational households, frankly, are the norm for a reason. Will you be okay? I will always be grateful that we answered honestly, and always a little in awe of my parents and what they did next. The last point. This is a sermon about families, but it's not just a sermon about families. We know it in our bones as Unitarian Universalists that there are as many ways to love and relate as there are lovers and relationships. And that has a message for this moment that we are in as a church community. This Sunday, we mark the start of a new experiment in being together. For the first 149 years of this church's existence, we gathered in a building on Sunday morning While our theology was unusual, the rhythms of church life stayed more or less the same and were similar to what Protestant churches in America have been doing for centuries. And then a year ago, 419 days ago, if you're counting, normal changed. And for the last 14 months, we've been meeting online, pre-recording worship for Sunday morning, and then gathering on YouTube, watching together and commenting on the chat room. And that's been strange. But it's also been a kind of normative experience. Right? It was strange, but we were doing it together. The moment that we're entering into now, this Sunday, is a little bit different. There are just under 40 people in this building right now. More than that are watching on YouTube. Some will watch this recording after the fact. And this corresponds to our relationship with the congregation as a whole right now. Some of you are excited to meet each other again, have been asking for this moment for the last couple months. And others of you have been asking in the last couple months if we can please just keep committee meetings on Zoom. This is the future of churches everywhere. Not a single normative way of interacting with the community, but as many ways as there are members of interacting. We've talked in this transition, I've talked in this transition about hybrid services, about the challenges of broadcasting live while we have a group of people experiencing the worship service in person as well, how we balance those two things, and how we manage the technology and the cords, and the Bob's back there and I'm up here and there's a live stream over there. But that's a technological challenge. That's the surface challenge. It's an expression of the underlying truth that there are now multiple ways of being in relationship with this community, and we haven't done that part before. But to bring this whole circle, we know that's okay. We know that that's not just okay, that that's good, because love is love. Relationship is relationship. In the same way that there are many, many ways to mark Mother's Day, many ways to think about family, there are many ways to interact with this church. So over the next few months, while we're at this low capacity moment in person, what we're not going to do is create an expectation that there are two tiers of participation, that there's a difference in kind between those in the room and those on the live stream. Going forward, we're actually going to prioritize this live streaming piece so that those who participate remotely will continue to be full participants in this community. It is good to be together. I have missed this. I cannot tell you how much good it does my soul to tell a joke in a sermon and hear laughter. These cameras don't laugh. You just guess at what the reaction time is going to be online. There are a lot of new pieces to get used to in the coming weeks and months. But that's okay. Because at the core of this community, this set of relationships strings in this room through that live stream among the staff, in the people that aren't here, in the people that have been away for a little while and are thinking about coming back right now, and the people who are worried about coming back, and the people who cannot wait to come back. The string is love. That's this community, however it gets expressed. We come to church because it is a place to practice caring for each other. It is a place where we can ask each other, are you going to be okay? And where we can answer that question honestly. Whether that's through a screen or behind a mask in person, the relationship is not diminished by the form it takes or the temporary barriers between us. Amen. There we go. Each week we come together in our service and we share the moments of joy and the moments of sorrow that we have in our lives. And we do this because of those connections. We know, because we are a part of this community, that celebration is better when it is with people that we love. And sorrow is easier borne when we are not alone. So we're going to try it a little bit differently this morning. Because we have some congregation members here and some online, for the last 14 months, we've been asking people to comment on the live chat on YouTube. Before that, we asked people to speak into silence here. So what we're going to do is in a moment, I'm going to invite you to speak the names of those you are holding in joy into shared silence. As you do, I'll repeat them into the microphone so that the folks watching online can hear. And then I'll repeat the names that they've typed through the microphone to this group. So, into this sanctuary of shared silence, please speak the name of those you are holding in joy this morning.
My great-grandson,
Dylan,
a graduate
who is a graduate.
My mother, Jean Fist.
Jean Fist.
My brother Greg and his son Jonah and his daughter-in-law Sarah, who will all be graduating from various schools.
Greg, Jonah, and Sarah, who will all be graduating from various schools soon.
My nephew Evan and his new fiancée Emily.
Evan and Emily, fiancés.
Michelle Dobsowitz, I can see.
Michelle Dobsowitz, she can see. In the live chat, joys and sorrows appear intermingled. So I'm going to ask that we speak sorrows into this space as well, and then I'll go through the full live chat afterwards. So would you now share your own name or those you are carrying in sorrow into this shared silence?
The Obama family have lost their beloved dog, Bo.
The Obama family on the loss of their dog, Bo.
Kay Brooke and family.
Kay Brooke. Kay Brooke and family.
My friend Priscilla.
Priscilla. From the live chat, we have these names. Ken, Ruth, and Megan. Sonia recently diagnosed with a new cancer. the people of India, Colombia, Penny, who passed the Rainbow Bridge yesterday, and Priscilla. All who are missing their mothers. Nancy, Ruth and Ron, Michelle Dooley, Zita, whose husband of 50 years died this week. Sending caring thoughts for my cousin Sandy, who is leaving us steadily. I'm trying to figure out how to handle her memory loss. So many of my cohort who are losing their parents now. The people of Myanmar. We also have joys in the chat box. I will do my best to read all of them as well. Shelley Fowler, who is getting her second vaccine this afternoon. Joy at hearing the laughter. Joy at seeing a candle lit in the chalice in the sanctuary. Lou Kaiser's father, Larry, who survived 2 surgeries. Joy from Dory Bush as the mother of 2 loving, caring sons. Kate McDougall writes, next weekend, Trevor and I get to hug our parents and our children when we gather to celebrate our daughter Cordelia's college graduation. Tom Winter writes, the joy of the tender care we have received from our beloved daughters. Are there any other joys or sorrows to be spoken into this space?
Joy of my 3 daughters and 2 granddaughters who are mothers.
Joy of daughters and granddaughters who are also mothers.
Joy of seeing Reverend Sinclair from the pulpit.
Oh, that is also a joy for me to be in this pulpit. There's a few others on the chat, being fully vaccinated and able to be with vaccinated friends. Marcia Cedardahl's youngest daughter's upcoming wedding. But for now, we'll turn to this next piece of music and join in holding these joys and sorrows that we have spoken into this space and those that we hold in our hearts, deeply felt, not spoken, but no less important. Each week we take up an offering to support this congregation, its programs, and our partners in the world. Because this is an ongoing pandemic, we are not going to pass an offering plate. That is pretty direct recommendations both from the CDC and from the local health department here. So what we'll do, I cannot believe I'm saying this, is invite you to take out your cell phones. You can text UC Lincoln and the amount you wish to give to 73256, the same as you have been doing for the last year. You can also give on Realm, our congregational database. There's also a box right outside the church office, or for this moment, we will overlook any cell phones in the sanctuary. All right. The offering will now be gratefully received. Closing words are once again by the poet John O'Donohue. May all that is unforgiven in you be released. May your fears yield their deepest tranquilities. May all that is unlived in you blossom into a future graced with love. Amen. And go in peace. That concludes our service. So the live stream is still running. We're going to leave it running for just a couple minutes. We're about to have a coffee hour on Zoom, so you have a couple options. I am going to make a beeline to my office, where I will participate in that. So you actually won't see me once I get off this pulpit. I'll go out that way. If you go home, we'll leave the coffee hour running for the next 50 minutes or so. So if you want to hop on and see the people that were participating online, you can do it that way. If you do want to stay here and chat, we just ask that you keep your masks on, try and keep 6 feet from each other. The patio is open. I know it's a little bit cold outside. That was our plan, was to send everybody out to the patio, but I do understand that it is not ideal weather right now. So thank you so much for being here.
I was only